as a gay person, you have to go to your loved ones and the people who are close to you and important to you, and you have to tell them something that might break that relationship. And you have to tell them for your own sanity and your own, because you don't want to, you want to stop lying to them. But at the same time, you never know whether you're going to get rejected. And that is a horrible feeling. But I think he is quite character building. And it's something that a lot of LGBT people have in common. And, certainly if you get a group of people of people who've been through that experience together, it will often come back. The conversation will often come around to coming out stories because it's so formative to us.
Steve, at what stage in your life did you find yourself? What relationship broke you to discover yourself?
I'm not sure I have necessarily a relationship that brought me to discover myself. I mean, I suppose for me, it was the moment I realized I was gay and sort of put two and two together, that was who I was. I had been called gay for a while at school for a few years. We lived in Surrey until I was 10, and I was being called gay. Or people would say, are you gay? And I just thought that meant happy and cheerful and things. So I always used to say yes. And then people go, oh, Steve's gay. And I didn't really understand what that meant. And we then moved to Scotland when I was 10. And I just thought, oh, well, that'll stop because, new set of people and things. And it started again very, very fast. So I suppose I don't really think of it as bullying. I thought of it as name calling, but I suppose it was bullying in a way. And then at some point, somebody explained to me what this word gay meant. Now, I had known I'd been attracted to men since I was about 6. So I can remember exactly where I was standing. The moment I was standing on the steps outside my primary school on the west coast of Scotland. I can even remember the duffel coat I was wearing when I sort of put two and two together and suddenly thought, yeah, actually, that word that people keep calling me and this thing I feel, that's the same thing. Yes, I am gay. And it's not something that I ever tried to deny myself. I've not something I've ever sort of thought. I obviously just thought, oh, I'm not going to tell a soul. But yeah, that was probably the moment where I found myself, because that was when I suddenly realized this sort of internal monologue or this sort of internal feeling had a name. And that was, I suppose, yeah, to me, that was the formative moment. That's when I sort of really started to realize who I was. So I'm not sure there was a relationship particularly in that. I suppose it was maybe the relationship with the people who were calling me names or whatever, but actually it was quite a solitary moment in many ways, because I was just, well, that's who I am, that's what I am. And I can't breathe a word of that to anybody. So it was actually, if anything, it was almost an anti-relationship, because it was like, no, that has to be private. That can't be talked about.
Yeah. What was your relationship like? What was your relationship like with your parents and siblings, if you have any?
I have 2 siblings. I have an older sister and a younger brother. And my relationship with them has always been pretty good. My sister, in fact, I know my older sister once said to my mother when we were kids, that she used to get annoyed that she could never get a rise out of me, because I'm fairly even-tempered. I'm not somebody who angers easily and things. And I think my sister, wanted to be able to sort of, annoy me and prod me and poke me and things, and I just wasn't. I wouldn't respond. Interestingly, my parents both died in 2017, about 6 months apart. My mother very unexpectedly, and then my father more expectedly about 6 months later. And that experience, going through that, brought me much closer to my siblings. Now, my siblings, for most of my adult life, have lived overseas. My sister has moved around a lot. My brother lives in New Zealand. So I don't actually see them that often. But, when I do see them, it's lovely. And actually, I've always got on with them fine. My brother and I went through a bit of a wobble when I came out, because he, at the time, was involved in the evangelical Christian church. And I think he struggled a bit with it. But now he's absolutely fine. And he and his wife and their kids, we know, get on very well. My relationship with my parents was fine. I didn't, I was never really a rebel as a kid. Again, I was too sort of even-tempered. I suppose because I knew I was gay, and I was hiding that probably did influence the relationship. And certainly my father, when I was a child, he traveled a lot for work. So while he was a perfectly loving father, I don't think I necessarily connected with him that much as a kid, because he wasn't around a lot. But also, I suppose I didn't really share his interests and things. And with hindsight, that probably was because I was growing up to be that young gay kid. But we never had it. We didn't have sort of crosswords particularly. And then when I came out, at the time, my parents took it badly, but actually very quickly were like, well, we still love you and you're still our son, and we want you to be happy. My father took a while to come to terms with it, but within about 3 or 4 years of me coming out, they came to stay with my then boyfriend and I in Brighton, ironically, it's somewhere where I now live. But he was it's how I got to know Brighton, was he lived down here. And there was one night we'd all gone to bed, or sort of just going to bed, and my father walked into our bedroom accidentally. I think he was looking for the bathroom, and Lance and I were just sitting in bed reading, which was exactly what my mum and dad would have been doing upstairs. And I think it was sort of what my father needed to see, that we were just doing exactly the same as they were, and that there was, life was just very ordinary. So yeah, in the last years of his life, my father had a pretty grim neurological degenerative disorder, and we're sort of nursing him through that, particularly the last 6 or 7 months of his life after my mother died. Because my siblings were overseas, I sort of became responsible for a lot of his care, and or certainly for his estate and for his looking after his welfare and things. So we were close in the last few months of his life, even though he lost the power of speech towards the end. So yeah, I say I don't feel I've had particularly poor relationships with any of my family. I've been very lucky, have quite a stable, loving household, and we've been through ups and downs, and certainly my coming out influenced that. But on the whole, relationships have been good.
You've had what would be called, I suppose, a normal childhood and upbringing.
Absolutely.
So apart from being called names in school by your mates, did you make friends in school easily, or did you find that you were, because they felt this young boy here was gay, that will isolate him?
Good question. We moved around twice when I was a kid. We moved once when I was 10 from Surrey to Scotland, and then we moved again when I was 15 from Scotland down to Bedfordshire. So I twice in my life got sort of pulled out of a friendship group and thrown into somewhere, a completely new environment. So I did learn to make friends myself. I learned that you had to just get yourself in there and do things and get involved with things to make friends. I was particularly struck when we moved from when I was 15. The school I arrived at, they all had very firm, well-established friendship groups that my friends who I had left in Scotland didn't have in quite the same way. And it was harder to break into that. But on the whole, yeah, I got involved. I always sang in the choir, and I did drama and school plays and things like that. I was never a sporty kid, so it wasn't as if I made friends with that. But I also did things like Cubs and Scouts, and I was a churchgoer as a child, and I advisedly say churchgoer rather than Christian. But yeah, so I suppose I made friends through church, through Cubs and things. And to say, by getting involved, I've always been somebody, even now, I will get involved. And I think if you're going to stand on the sidelines and carp about something, or if you don't like the way something's being done, get involved and do something about it. So, again, that opens up new friendship groups. So as a kid, yeah, I had friends from different parts of my life, school, Cubs, scouting, church, whatever. But I think I also recognize how much you have to work at relationships. I was very aware when I left Surrey and we moved to Scotland, suddenly you're out of sight and out of mind. And it's very hard to keep those sort of friendships going long term. And I am still in touch with my best friend from those years before we moved. But it is tough. In some ways, social media makes it easier. Facebook and things, there's lots of people I'm connected to on Facebook who are friends from school days, who I wouldn't say I'm necessarily still friends with, but still in contact with. And, I think that's the difference.
Yeah, I have the same relationship with some of my mates from school also, that one person in particular was out in San Francisco. So I keep in contact with him via Facebook. So even though we haven't actually met each other for many a year, another friend from school is out in Brisbane in Australia.
Yeah.
So there you go. But indeed,
I think Facebook's really good for that. And it's funny, I've just been to the States for a speaking conference and bumped into this woman who was like, oh my God, Steve, how are you doing? And how's the new puppy? And I love the way you've done the new house and your new garden, all this stuff. And I'm thinking, who are you? And we're Facebook friends, and she doesn't post much, so I don't see her stuff. So we'd obviously met at a previous conference. I didn't really remember her, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
But I thought, isn't that interesting how she knows my life? She knows where I'm at,
Yeah.
and what I'm doing, and things like that from what I've posted. And of course, I think social media is very mediated, and we all post a slightly idealized version of what we're doing. But it was just interesting to me to think this person saw me as somebody she knew because she had seen my life on social media.
Yeah. I did see a photograph on social media. I think it was Facebook, with yourself, Nathan Littleton, Thorsten, and Nicole Yeckel at the Influence Conference there a few weeks ago. So well done for going out there to the United States. So in school, were you academically gifted, or were you more geared towards, I suppose you could say, the artistic type subject?
I'm reasonably academically gifted, I suppose. I was never top of the year, but which my sister was. It's funny, and in Scotland they track that sort of stuff, and you're very aware of who is top of the year. The way their education system certainly used to work. I don't know if it still does. And it was interesting when we moved, because particularly the move at age 15, I was halfway through at that point O levels, what would now of course be GCSEs. And it was interesting. My teachers in Scotland had sent us a report card to the teachers in England saying this was where they thought I would sit in terms of streaming and things. And it took a while to work that through. And I was put into a couple of very low classes in subjects, and then suddenly moved up very fast. I would with most things I would normally expect to be in a top stream, I suppose. But I mean, I didn't particularly enjoy studying. I still don't, if I'm honest. It's not something, I know some people love constantly learning and studying and things, and it's not something that's ever brought me joy. I think, I don't have a particularly strong attention span. I'm not good at learning from reading or from watching or from listening. I'm good at learning from doing. Having said that, I was also, music, theatre, those sorts of things were always a big part of my world. I enjoyed art. I've never been very good at it. I don't have a particularly good eye, which is a shame, because my father was actually quite a good artist. I think it's partly because I am, and I can't remember now the exact word, I am left-handed, but not fully left-handed. And there is a word for it. And I can't remember now exactly what that word is.
Ambidextrous, I think, is the word.
It's what, sorry?
Ambidextrous.
Well, no, because that's if you can use both hands, and I can't.
Yeah.
But I'm not truly left-handed, because I pick up a pen with my left hand, or a paintbrush, or a crayon, or whatever. But I do everything else right-handed, and I have lousy handwriting. And I think it's partly because I'm not truly left-handed, but but holding something in my right hand feels weird. But I think that's one of the reasons, actually, I was never very good at art. Although I enjoyed it, I don't have control of a pencil or pen or paintbrush or whatever in the same way that an artist needs. So yeah, what I would love to say I am an artist, it would come through performance or music or something rather than visual arts.
Yeah. I'd be a person who learns by doing them also myself. In school, I enjoyed school in the main, but I kind of struggled with the more linguistic type subjects, because I'm not the most sensory person. I'm more a person who goes with their gut feeling or intuition. So although I could understand a concept, say with history or geography, actually putting it on paper was a struggle for me. So I got exam results that didn't really equate to the effort I put into the subject, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same with things like maths and languages where you have to follow rules, follow set structures and things I didn't do well at. Whereas certainly social sciences, sociology, to an extent history, although I gave it up before O level, but particularly geography, I did very well at. And in fact, I ended up doing geography at university because I had actually applied to do theatre study in politics and ended up going through clearing. And my geography teacher from my A-levels rang me at home the day the A-level results came out and said, "You should be doing geography. Your brain just thinks like a geographer," and it does. And I don't know why, but I then went to university and did geography and did well there. And I've always wondered what would have happened had I gone elsewhere and done theatre studies and politics. But I seem to have a brain that works along geography lines for some reason. And I've always enjoyed physical geography and human geography. And even now, I like to know where I am. I like to be able to read a landscape. I like to be able to read the social, economic geography of a place. It's funny. And geography is one of those things that is a discipline that sits across arts and sciences.
Yeah,
In fact, at university, I was given the choice because I had done the way I had the units I had chosen within my degree. I could have had a BSc or a BA at the end. I chose a BA because I don't know. I suppose I've always just erred towards the arts. But yeah, it's interesting. It's one of those disciplines that does straddle both.
That's right. It's a bit like economics also. They can be BA or BSc or BCom. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. It is a huge subject, geography. I remember from my own Leaving Cert, which is A-level equivalent here in Ireland. It's just ginormous amount of material in geography, that you can learn over the years.
Yeah.
Indeed. And after university, what was your first job? How did you manage to build relationships within the work environment, for example?
My first proper job was with the BBC. Although I had spent, after I finished university, I spent a couple of summer seasons as a tour guide, taking American Methodists on 2-week-long tours, coach tours of the UK. So I had to read up about Methodism because I'm not a Methodist. But that was really interesting. That was a real learning experience for me, building relationships with people, because I'd meet these people, spend 2 quite intense weeks with them and then never see them again. But on my first, I then spent a year, I also spent a year backpacking around the world, then ended up spending 5 months in Argentina teaching in a bilingual private school. But my first, quote, proper job, excuse me, was as a researcher at BBC News. And I suppose, how did I build relationships? I mean, again, you just sort of, you get involved. I know the people I got on with very well. I think one of the advantages, I don't want to say there was a gay mafia, but there was a bit. There was quite a group of gay men within the newsroom and the associated offices, and we would all hang out together and we would socialize and things. So that sort of gave me an in because it was a group of people straight away I had something in common with. But also I worked shifts. The first job I had within the BBC, I worked shifts, including nights. And sitting on a night shift, if it's quiet, you just chat and you talk, and you hear people's life stories, and while you're working with them, you start to pick up their relationship issues or what's going on in their lives at the moment. So yeah, and again, there are people I'm still friends with now who I first met at the BBC, and that's 25 years ago now. So yeah, I think it's finding a group of people with whom you have something in common, and then it is getting involved. So I would volunteer for things and get involved in extracurricular stuff and things, just because actually then you would get to spend more time with people.
And moving from the BBC, you moved from the BBC into professional speaking. How did you manage to find that journey, or how did you manage to build up that speaking business over the years?
Well, when I left the BBC, I actually was headhunted to go and become PR director for a .com. It was called Queer Company, and it was aimed at the LGBT community. With hindsight, the business model was actually out of date even when we started, although I don't think we realized it quite at the time. And we picked up £3.5 million of venture capital funding. We burnt through it in 18 months and probably went bust. So that was when I went self-employed. I went freelance originally because I just sort of started taking freelance work while I looked for a proper job, shall we say. But right from the go, so I was running a PR business. That was what I was doing when I was self-employed. But I was a very early adopter with social media. In fact, just with a bit of online working generally. Even at the BBC, I had been sort of advising on some aspects of online working. And so people started saying, "Oh, would you come in and talk to our business about social media?" And I mean, at this stage, it really was, what is social media? This was pre-Facebook and things. We were still using things like CompuServe and AOL and things like that. So people started asking me to go in and train them. And then somebody said, "Oh, would you come and speak at my conference about this?" And I did that. And then somebody saw me there and was like, "Oh, could you come and speak at my conference about that?" And did that. And then somebody else said, "Oh, you're good at speaking on stage. Do you train other people how to do that?" And I was like, "Well, actually, yeah, I can do that. That's absolutely within my skill set." So I started coaching people. So right alongside the PR business, I always had this training and coaching work going on, and a bit of speaking. Didn't really think of it as anything other than just a little bit of extra money on the side. But gradually that side of the business grew, and it became problematic because I would be in a training room all day, because I started doing a lot of media training as well, training people on media interview skills. I'd be in a training room and I'd have PR clients leaving messages on my phone going, "Where are you? We need this." And it became really problematic trying to balance the two. And then I was working with a business coach, and she said, "Why are you still doing the PR?" She said, "It's not making you happy, and it's not making you money." She said, given the choice tomorrow morning, if you could go and deliver anything, would you go and deliver a day of PR work, or would you go and deliver some coaching or training? And I straight away was like, "I'll go and deliver training." So we'll go and do that. So I fired my last PR client, and that's when the business became purely speaking, training, coaching. And that was, crikey, 12 years ago now. And that's when I then discovered the Professional Speaking Association and engaged with that as an organization. So it was a gradual thing. It was always part of the business, and then now it's the focus of the business. And I suppose the other thing that's now a big part of my business is emceeing. I do a lot of MC compere work, so I host conferences and events. So it's been a fun journey, and it's a journey that's not over yet, I hope. But it's just so it was I never actually really made a conscious decision that this was what I was going to do. I was going to be a speaker. It just came to me. I suddenly realized I was a speaker. So built on that.
Yeah. I think what you're saying there, Steve, is you'd like to build multiple streams of income, that'll increment your business over time and add more value to your business.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, good man. Well done in that regard. In terms of personal relationships, where did you meet John, may I ask?
John and I met on social media. And it's one of the reasons, I suppose, I was sort of seen as an early adopter. We met in 2002. So again, this is way before the social media platforms we know now. And we were there was a gay website called Out in the UK. And it was sort of a social site. It wasn't really a dating site. It was a social site as anything else. But it did tell you where somebody was in relation to you. And it was when the company I was working for was going out of business. He was on the first day in his new job, and it just said, this person is, I can't remember now, 300 yards away. And we just started chatting, and we chatted for a couple of days, and then met for lunch, and it went from there. And it's funny, John says he knew as soon as I walked into the restaurant that this was going to be something serious. It took me a little while. I think because I was so wrapped up in the fact that I was about to lose my job because I could see the business going down, that I wasn't really looking for a relationship. And it's ironic because people always say it's only when you stop looking for a relationship that you'll probably find one. So we met online, and I say that was, this is way before Tinder or Grindr or Facebook or any of the platforms people might use now. So it was really and it's a real shame, actually. Out in the UK, the website we met on has finally shut down. It gradually dwindled because it was overtaken by all the other better known platforms. But it's now, we were probably one of the early couples to meet in a social media environment.
Thank you. An early adapter, as they say. Looking back at your past, Steve, what circumstances would you consider as character building blocks that shape the person you've become today?
Certainly coming out to myself, coming out to my family and friends and then colleagues and things. That's certainly been a big character building, because it is one of the things that straight people just I don't think often understand, is as a gay person, you have to go to your loved ones and the people who are close to you and important to you, and you have to tell them something that might break that relationship. And you have to tell them for your own sanity and your own, because you want to stop lying to them. But at the same time, you never know whether you're going to get rejected. And that is a horrible feeling. But I think he is quite character building. And it's something that a lot of LGBT people have in common. And, certainly if you get a group of people of people who've been through that experience together, it will often come back. The conversation will often come around to coming out stories, because it's so formative to us. So I think that was certainly a really formative experience. And I suppose the other circumstance was actually that period where I left the BBC, and I had wanted to work in broadcasting all my life. And I realized it wasn't what I wanted it to be. I wasn't getting what I wanted out of it. I was just a very small cog in a very large machine. I was doing very little true journalism. I was logistics busting most of the time in the job I ended up in. And basically somebody offered to double my salary, and I'm afraid I followed the money. I'll always think, what would have happened if I'd stayed at the BBC? I don't know. I can't, you'll never know. But that decision to leave the Beeb, go into a startup company, then that not working, and making a decision then to stay on my own. I did start looking for a proper job and just didn't find one that was right. And a couple of recruitment agencies actually said, we're struggling to place you. So yeah, that was a formative experience because the weird thing about my career, although it's only the last 21 years of it in business, is I love being part of a team, and yet I've actually worked on my own a lot. Although I've gone in, obviously I've worked with clients and I have spent time at events and worked with teams in the PSA and things. The bulk of my working life is spent on my own. Even when I am on stage in front of several thousand people, I'm on my own. And I probably had dinner on my own the night before, or with a client who I've only just met and things. And I think that's one of the things that has formed me. And one of the things I sometimes regret, or maybe think wish had been different, is that actually I had worked as part of a team, because I do love working as part of a team. It plays to my strengths. I'm good as part of a team. I'm good as a leader within a team. And that's just the way my career has developed. That just hasn't happened. But yeah, never say never.
I can empathize with that, Steve, because I would be a person who likes their own space at work.
Right.
I like to be part of a team, but I like a bit of independence at the same time. And structure, or too much of it, doesn't fit my personality. I don't like the word structure. It just puts a shiver down my spine almost.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't like being micromanaged in the least bit. So,
I can understand that.
Being part of a team means you could be working with people across the globe, but you don't meet each other face to face every day. That's fine with me.
Well, yeah, it's funny because I don't miss that bit. I don't miss the politics, the overfamiliarity, the expectation you're going to be part of something. It's funny. I don't miss that. And I see sometimes companies, clients, I might have dinner with a client after I've run a session for them. And actually, when you see the dynamic, I just think, okay, I don't miss the politics and that sort of stuff, but I miss the creativity of being part of a team, and I miss the stimulation and the fact that you can build something together. I miss that bit, but yeah, I don't miss the office politics at all.
Like myself, I agree with you in that one. Yeah, but I do have the creativity side here, because working on the GYFT show, for example, I'm part of a team working on this show. I go out there and I get the people to come on the show. Somebody else does the post-production and editing of the videos and putting them up on YouTube and whatever else. So we are part of a team.
Good.
One last question for you, Steve. Name one relationship you'd like to have again, given another chance. And what would you do better this time around?
Oh, that's a tricky question. I suppose there's one in particular. There was a friend of mine, Trevor, who we just really clicked, and it was one of those friendships where I think for a while we both dallied around the fact that was this more than just a friendship or not? And at the time, I think I was seeing somebody, and then when I became single again, he was seeing somebody, and I think so. It was a friendship. But Trevor committed suicide, and he had tried once, and somebody had found him, and a number of us had supported him through that, and we thought he was back on an even keel, and then he tried again and succeeded. And I will always regret not recognizing the signs a second time. So I think if I could, I think I would play that relationship with Trevor differently. Not necessarily that we would have had a relationship. I think it was best as a friendship. But if I could go back and do that again, I would, and just, I suppose, look out for him and look for the warning signs and things. And that's probably the one relationship that I will always think that I didn't do my best in that, and somebody else suffered. Somebody else, took the ultimate decision and things. So that's probably the relationship I would want to try again.
It's been a fascinating conversation today, Steve. I'd love to thank you very much for your time. So well done.
Lovely. Thanks, John.
We land on planet Earth into some family situation. And in my case, I was very blessed. I landed into an Irish Catholic family, married parents, mom and dad never drank, never took drugs, no obvious madness. And there were 5 of us brought up in that environment. There was no money. Hence part of my drive to learn how other people got ahead. Hence my drive to finding out how to build a business, because going back to employees trade time for money. My dad did that all his life. They taught us all how to work hard. They taught us all. My mother would say, "You get nothing for nothing," right? but she also said, she encouraged us to make mistakes. The man or the woman who never made a mistake made nothing, she said.